Hey there again, guys. It's Mr. Hefner. I'm coming to you today from beautiful Bar Harbor, Maine, and we're going to be reading a legend today. Now, if you remember, legends have elements of mythology, but they're connected to some degree in some historical event or some actual person. They're often exaggerated and include a lot of hyperbole, and all cultures have their own legends. We're going to take a look today at an Irish legend. This is the legend of an Irish hero named Mccool, and I think you're going to find this interesting. We're also going to be looking for irony in this story. So there are different types of irony, and today we're going to be looking for something called irony of situation. But that's all in the presentation, so let's get started with that. Okay, so the piece we're going to read today is called The Silver Pool, but it's just one story in an incredibly big collection or saga about this character I mentioned named Mccool. Our lesson essential question for today are going to be, what are the elements of a legend? That's pretty simple, and that's a simple definition too. But what I'd like you to be able to do is show me where those elements of a legend appear in this legend of Mccool. Today we're going to have two literary terms that we're looking at. The first one is going to be, I'm going to call up that laser pointer there because I just like the way that looks. The first is going to be legend, because that's our genre that we're looking at today. And legends are stories that come down from the past. They're often based in real events or people, but unlike myths, they're at least partly historical. In fact, there are American legends that were taught as factual history for a long time until historians got a little more careful about researching primary source documents and things like that. The other thing we're going to look for is we're going to look for irony, but specifically this special type of irony called irony of situation. So irony occurs when you have the difference between appearance and reality in a story, but that's a terrible, terrible definition. I was never happy with that. Irony has this little extra something. You know it when you see it, but it's hard to put it into words. I'll give you an example here. So if I was just going to do irony is the difference between appearance and reality, and somebody says, oh, look, there's water over there, and walks over and realizes, oh, it's not water, it's just a mirage, that's not irony. And yet it's the difference between appearance and reality. On the other hand, irony has this little extra twist. Give you an example here. So if you're riding home on your school bus one day, and Godzilla picks up your bus and looks in the window at you, that is not irony. It's absolutely just terrifying, right? But if it ever happens to you now that I said it's not irony, it will be irony. So if you're riding home in your school bus one day and Godzilla picks up the bus and looks in the window, instead of screaming like everybody else, just look at your neighbors on the bus and say, you know, this is so ironic. And you can explain why. So irony has that little extra something. Irony of situation is that example that I just gave you, where little details in the story have to all come together to make the irony happen, okay? So we have to follow the whole story and the different events and look for little clue words here and there, and then we'll recognize the irony when we see it later on. So we'll find it as we go through the story. Now, let's talk about this main character. It looks like Mccool, I can't even pronounce it the way it looks, Fionn Mccool, but Gaelic is almost never pronounced the way it's spelled. And it's just simply pronounced like this, Mccool. Mccool, and how cool are you if your name is Mccool? He's this hero, and he's almost, I don't know if you've watched any of the Star Wars movies or anything like that, but in those Star Wars movies, you learn things about the character Luke Skywalker. At the beginning of the movie, you think he's just a boy and he's fighting against Darth Vader, and all these different things happen. You meet his sister, he gets training as a Jedi because he's got the Force in him. And by the time you get to The Empire Strikes Back, you learn that his father was also a Jedi and his father is Darth Vader. And all these little details had to come together. But then what has to happen is this poor boy sent away to be raised by his aunt and uncle has to rise up, get his training, take his true place in the world, and make everything right. If you've ever read or watched any of the Lord of the Rings movies, it's the same kind of story you have going on with the character Aragorn. He was a Dunedain, he ran away, he hid by himself, didn't want to be bothered, but by the end of the story, He's got to come back. He's got to fight the villains, become a leader, and regain his rightful spot as king. Okay? These stories are pretty common, these epic legends like this. And with Finn Mccool, Finn had a father who was the head of one of his groups called the Fianna, a group of warriors. His father was murdered. Finn hid out as a boy. He's had all kinds of experiences and adventures that have all given him new skills. And now he's got to rise up, take his place as head of the Fianna, and defeat evil and put things back the way that they're supposed to be. Now, this legend, all these legends with Finn are absolutely just full of hyperbole. Hyperbole is a fancy word for exaggeration. This guy was like as tall as a building. He could run super fast and pick thorns from his feet while he was running. He could go through the forest at top speed and walk so gently that he didn't make any noise. And so even today, some of the Irish people say that he's still alive. He never died. He's just sleeping. And one day when we need him again, he'll come back. So in Irish culture, he's like the top of the legend. Historical legend, again, as I said here, some of these things are based in history. We know that in the 8th century in Ireland, there was a king. He was at the capital at Tara. And there were all these different clans, and each clan was headed by somebody different. And they all fought one another. They paid tribute to the king, but they were into art and poetry. And so their stories were written down, but in the forms of poets. And the poets were considered to be very special people. And so in this story that we're going to read, you're going to find that the role of poet is actually a goal for somebody who could be a great hero and a warrior. Sometimes we think of, like tough men don't read poetry, but in Irish culture, tough men write poetry. All right, so as we go through here, be sure to add the character names to your notes so you'll remember them later. Write some quick descriptions so you'll keep them straight. It doesn't hurt to write a brief summary of the plot, because especially if you're going to have to explain how the irony of situation came about, you're going to have to explain those little subtle details in the plot that built to that irony later on. You should be able to explain why this is a legend. What characteristics of a legend do you see in this story? And then the irony of the situation. Now, I'm going to give you an opportunity, too, for an extra credit assignment here. So if you want to pick up some extra points, I'll show you that. But again, look for legend, look for irony of situation. And if you understand irony of situation and you want to earn 5 extra credit points, there's an assignment in Schoology where all you have to do is, it says 3 paragraphs, but as long as you have a beginning, middle, and an end, I don't care how many paragraphs you have. I want you to create a little story where irony of situation occurs. I have heard some amazing ones over the years that my students just put together. I'll give you an example of my favorite one that I remember. Quick version, the irony of situation is easy. It was a story in which, at the end of the story, somebody was found dead. Where were they found dead? In the living room. You get it? Irony, it's the situation that makes it ironic. It's literally called a living room, and yet somebody's died. And we shared the story in class, and immediately another student had another idea and said, "Oh, I get it, Mr. Hefner. I know how he died." I'm like, "What? How did he die? He's in the living room and he's dead. We don't need anything else." "Oh, no, I can make this better." I'm like, "How can you make it better?" He choked to death on a lifesaver. All right. Actually, that wouldn't happen. The whole idea with lifesavers is they have a hole so that you can breathe even if you get it caught in your throat. But anyway, I thought it was kind of funny. So that's irony of situation. If you want to try that assignment, you can put that in Schoology. It's completely optional. It will not hurt your grade if you choose not to do it. All right, so that's everything for today. If you haven't read the story, go read the story on your own. And if you're in class, we're going to read the story right now. Thanks for staying with me, guys. I'll see you next time.